Thank you. Thank you, everybody. I have a confession to make. And that is that earlier today, as I was thinking about this topic, as I was thinking about what we'll be speaking of, I was convinced, for no apparent reason, that this is going to be a panel conversation, and I wouldn't be giving you a speech. And so I thought that in the spirit of a decentralized theme, we will make it a panel conversation. Except you are going to be the moderators. So I'm going to give you a premise, a topic, for just a couple of minutes. And then let's see where you would like to take the conversation. Because we are thinking about the future of education and the impact of decentralizing technologies on education. So I will start with a slightly controversial perspective, perhaps, in a theme like this, which is mission accomplished. The education sector is wildly decentralized. The brand leader in higher education globally has 1/4 of 1/100% of global market share. The brand leader in high school education has an even smaller share of the market. You can go to any institution all over the world, be provided an education in a completely different way, different location, different professors, pick a different major, different subject of study, wildly decentralized. Who here thinks that the education system in the world is good? Anybody? I didn't think so. As Patrick said earlier, one of the real questions that we have isn't what do we do with a technology. It's not even what we do with a philosophy. It's what is the problem that we're trying to solve. And the reality is that despite the fact that education, in secondary education, post-secondary education, is wildly decentralized, it's all pretty much exactly the same. You go and take an introductory to physics class at Harvard University, at a no-name community college down the street from Harvard, or in a university or college halfway around the world. It's basically the same course. It's basically the same modality. It's the same process of go and read a textbook, either attend a lecture or not, forget everything you've learned, realize that it's the final, cram for the exam, pass it, forget everything that was on the exam. It's true all over the world. Yet it's a completely decentralized system. Curious. And so I'm going to just leave that premise there. And now, given that statement, I'm going to ask you, raise your hand if you want to pull on a thread from any of these observations, and we'll see where it goes. Right there. 1 second, the mic will come for you.
Well, it's a two-part question, and one of them is, or comment, one of them is in education, it's because there, even though it's decentralized, it has the same incentive. It's to standardize. And in regards to the previous talks, the problem that they were trying to solve is automation, access, and stuff like that. Well, that's not what the technology was built for. The technology was built for trustless interactions without the need of a trusted third party, where the trusted third party could abuse trust. So if you're building something decentralized, but you still need a trusted third party to execute ownership, then it's not like it's the same problem with the schools. You're not really solving anything.
Right. Excellent point. So let's build on that. In many ways, one of the centralizing forces that we have to deal with is when correlative or indicative signals replace the actual thing you are interested in. Is any employer, any graduate school, any funder of a startup interested in your ability to pass a test that you then forget what you've passed? Clearly not. But somehow that has become a substitute for an institutional stamp of approval that the world has just come to accept. We are standing on the grounds of a brand new institution that is taking that premise to task at a fundamental level. Because the bet that Libertad is taking, the bet that Minerva took years ago that has paid off handsomely, is that the reality of what all of these future channels are interested, the reality of what is important for the liberty of an individual, is actually not correlative indicators that don't actually help the student build the capacity, but it is to actually build the capacity that is necessary to help them be successful in the next stages of life. So that, to me, brings kind of an interesting question, which is, in some ways, a decentralized system that is centralized on a certain set of metrics can provide the opportunity for an institution that cares about actual outcomes to fit into that system and offer a substantively different type of product, a better product. But can we decentralize even further? Who wants to pick up on that thread? Microphone over here.
Please.
Okay, here.
Hola, buenas tardes. Bueno, yo creo que uno de los principales problemas de la educación es que no está centrado en el individuo. O sea, la educación es genérica y entonces no permite desde la infancia desarrollar las habilidades y los potenciales que cada uno tiene. Entonces debería de haber desde el inicio en la educación una diferenciación, por lo menos con los potenciales básicos que son racionales, emocionales, que en este caso serían artísticos y motrices, para poder generar una educación de éxito y que la gente sea feliz haciendo lo que hace, porque…
Si no se me olvida.
Ay, perdón.
Our colleague is asking that one of the great problems with education is generic, so there's no way to differentiate those abilities that might be either intrinsic or evolving from a certain group of individuals or a certain set of individuals, and shouldn't we be more focused and attentive to those particular abilities and to identify those abilities? ¿Algo más?
No, es todo.
Wonderful. Okay. Excellent question. Well, that's actually one of the questions at the crux of the educational enterprise. Is the goal to accentuate the individual abilities of every individual, or is the goal to fill in the gaps that individuals may have, or is it both? And one could imagine that in an holistic education, right, the ability to further your mastery, whether you start at ground zero with very little ability whatsoever, or if you start at a relatively high level, but to provide the kinds of opportunities for every individual to thrive. Sounds like an ideal. Now here's the hard question. We all know that learning is different than knowing. It's not that hard to know something. You can look stuff up. You can reference things. Acquiring an information or even knowing that you should be doing X, Y, or Z in theory is not such a hard thing to teach. The real trick is getting the individual to learn how and when to do those things. How to apply what it is that they know in a situation they've not encountered before. So that requires more than just information. The printing press has been around for a long, long time. Universities predated the printing press, and they were initially used to acquire and then disseminate information because they were the most efficient way of disseminating information. But after the introduction of the book, universities were no longer that necessary to disseminate information. Fast forward hundreds of years, and of course there's the introduction of the television, the radio. Radio first, of course, then the television, then the internet. And all of a sudden, dissemination of information is that much easier. But universities continue to try and disseminate information. Now, why is that? It's because the format that was developed to disseminate information 1,000 years ago was this. One person standing on a lectern or a stage, talking at other people, usually while they are asleep. To learn how to use information, you have to apply it. You have to do something with it. And most importantly, you need to change the environment in which you do it. That requires interaction with other people. That requires bouncing ideas off of one another, connecting concepts, applying them, and having somebody that connects the thread. And so, one of the interesting dilemmas is that we have all different levels of abilities. We all have different backgrounds. We all have different goals in life. Yet, fully individualized, personalized instruction misses one of the most important components: the exploration of nuance. Because in most of life, when you get to application, there isn't one answer. There aren't even three answers. There's a spectrum of potentially correct answers. And you need interaction with many people in order to be able to explore how to apply those types of knowledge in different situations, in different cultures, in different contexts. And so if you really want effective personalized education, it isn't one-to-one, it's many-to-one. It's the opposite of what a traditional educational model is. And until further technologies are able to explore nuance, which they're very, very far from doing that. Our challenge collectively is to create a model where different people come together and learn those nuances and apply those things in ways that are mutually beneficial. Where one person may be strengthening a skill they have, and somebody else is first being introduced to it. And at the same time, the one that has that one strong benefit may be working on a deficiency they have, which a third person is already strong at. And that ability to construct a different kind of program that achieves those goals, that gets to that kind of element, but does so recognizing that learning is a communal event. It is a social opportunity. That is the real trick of creating a community of learners that come together for effective purposes for one another. That is fundamentally a differentiated, decentralized opportunity. Because in order to find individuals who can come together, who can learn in that way together, there is just a reality of context, of their lived experience, of their aspirations, of the community that is formed. And when you take that kind of approach, even when different institutions around the world use the same approach, they wind up with radically different kinds of educations. And so when you focus not on the correlative, the concept of, oh, if you just go through the motions and you pass the test and you get a degree, now you've covered the ground and you can move onwards. But instead, if you actually think about human development, right, the community itself, both in its design, its structure, and its implementation, will wind up having a diversity of offerings. Right? And that's one of the reasons why the higher education system today, the secondary education system today, is so homogeneous when you look at it broadly, where education is basically ineffective and globally so. But when institutions embrace, the very few institutions like Universidad de la Libertad, embrace the goals of personal development, the nature of the program is by definition unique. Who wants to follow up on that?
Well, not necessarily follow up on that, but it occurred to me that in this opportunity that decentralized technologies afford us for better educational experience, we are assailed with questions here about how artificial intelligence is going to destroy education, turn us all into a bunch of Terminators, and only Arnold Schwarzenegger is going to be able to come and save us. So, and this includes people like Yuval Harari and the other doomsayers about the grave dangers of artificial intelligence. I'm sure you have another opinion. You share it with us. You've shared it before, but could you share it again?
Happy to. So I think it's again, a crucial thing to understand. Artificial intelligence, like any breakthrough technology, and it is a breakthrough technology, has the fundamental opportunity to accelerate, to augment the capacity of a human. All technologies, going back to the Stone Age, have augmented human capacity. Initially, most of the technologies augmented our physical strength. Eventually, they augmented things that were really, we weren't particularly well suited for to do in our brain. For example, long computation, right? But now, right, the ability for us to augment solutions, to augment outputs, will require human beings to adapt in vastly more profound ways than they needed to adapt in the past. For example, when somebody first got a washing machine, right? The adoption of the washing machine, rather than using a washboard and scrubbing their clothes clean, was not a very big leap. It was a huge benefit right away. And you didn't have to learn that much around it. Even when you think about the introduction of typing, right, rather than writing, right, or word processing, of course, later on. Sure, you needed to learn how to type quickly, and some people had a hard time doing that, but the benefits very quickly outweighed the costs of moving to a word processing versus handwriting. When you think about interacting with an artificial intelligence, you think about what kinds of cognitive tools do you need to deploy in order to better utilize that than anybody else. And now, all of a sudden, higher order thinking, being able to edit in vastly better ways, being able to weave together answers, being able to know what to accept and what to reject, how to evaluate, right? How to structure a thought, an original thought that you would then use artificial intelligence to support and build up claims for. Those are incredibly important higher level thinking skills. And so let me give you an example. I had a conversation with Sam Altman about 18 months ago. Sam Altman is the founder of OpenAI, of course, one of the leading lights of artificial intelligence, OpenAI being the company that built and runs ChatGPT. And Sam told me a year and a half ago that 70% of the code that OpenAI engineers write is now written by the AI. That was not with ChatGPT 4. It wasn't with 3.5. It was barely with 3. Right? Now, in Silicon Valley, there is a mythical being. They're not that mythical because I've employed several of them in my career, known as the 10x engineer. Right? The 10x engineer is the engineer that can produce 10 times the level of productivity as a typical engineer. And they are worth their weight in gold. They're spectacular individuals, at least from a coding perspective, sometimes personality, not so much. And they are central to many breakthrough technology companies. But they are exceedingly rare. They exist, but they're very rare. Now imagine that there isn't just a proliferation of 10x engineers, but all of a sudden you will get 10x, 50x, 100x professionals in every piece of knowledge work that exists. I mentioned in a talk a couple of days ago that this week there is a new service called Omniscience that launched an ability for you to provide a prompt, point to some raw data, and it will produce a fiction or nonfiction book in 8 minutes. Not an answer, not a chapter, not a page, a book. I can tell you as a co-author and co-editor of a book, right? The amount of time and cycles to get that first draft is significantly longer than 100 times 8 minutes. And so think about, what does it mean to enter a world where some educational institutions like this one will produce 100x productive individuals, whereas others will at best produce 1x or sometimes below. If you want to think about the future of education, think about that.